So like we were saying, tell us a little bit more about those teams in Northern Virginia.
Mhm.
You got regions C and D, and we know about some of the powerhouses, but we talked a little bit about Centerville. I think that their schedule is strong. I think them having those close games, there's some value in it. They've only lost 2 games by 10 points to quality schools and programs. But what are your thoughts on Centerville, and is there anybody else we might be overlooking?
Yeah, I think because they had this recent trip up where Madison got them and they've kind of owned them lately head to head. I think with about 8 straight wins, is that people now feel that Madison and Westfield have vaulted to the top in that region. But Centerville still got a matchup with Westfield coming up, and I feel like when you get to the playoffs, you see a lot of times a rematch of a close game and it goes the other way. That could be what happens for Centerville because they know now it's win or go home, do or die. And last year, Madison was building towards that moment to get to a state championship. They played South County again, who they almost beat the year before in the COVID-shortened spring season. They had Alex Dredge back. They had all those seniors, and it was a veteran group. Centerville's got the senior-laden veteran group with a bunch of players that have been building to this point, not even just Isaiah Radlin, who's a big deal, obviously 2,000-yard rusher, but you've got, in addition to that, Nathan Patterson, the kicker, going to JMU, get Vitzi going to William & Mary at defensive line. They've got some veteran players, so they would be the pick, and you can ride a player like Radlin, much like in C, where you got 6-7 contenders. You got West Potomac, you got West Springfield, Alexandria City's got athletes. We know about Lake Braddock's offense. South County is an experienced team with some depth to them and quality on both sides of the ball. Fairfax has that player that's just the different animal in Tony Rojas to ride.
Yep.
And that could be the real key to them getting through. So those are the 2 favorites. But, like we said before, that could be the seatbelt region in C because that feels like there's going to be a 41-40, 37-36 game in the postseason. And 6C's a lot like 4B we talked about earlier with the King Georges, the Dinwiddies, the Veronas, where it's almost a flip of a coin because they're all so evenly matched. Who can have that thing that they can exploit on the other team? And to me, right now, I look at the way Rojas is playing and the way his teammates are feeding off of him. They got that kind of swagger about him.
Yeah, if he stays injury free, he plays running back also. And if you're a linebacker who can run, i.e. Tremaine Edmonds, who went in the first round, that's the whole thing, and he can run. There's a lot more parity in Northern Virginia. They're not as top heavy. I'm going to pick Fairfax to come out of a great region, and then I'm also I'm going to pick out of the Centerville, McLean. I'm going to go with Westfield. The real question is, can either of those teams get past what is projecting to be Oscar Smith and Freedom Woodbridge, which you don't like to say it, but those are the 2 top dogs. Do you think either of them can do it?
Well,
one second, Matt. Well, you're the expert, but remember this, Kurt. Yeah. They're going to meet in the final, and they'll these coaches always are prepared. It's just one game. It's not the best 2 out of 3. Right. But go ahead, Matt. Go ahead. Yeah. That's what I've been seeing.
I have a lot of faith in Kyle Simmons. I don't know that he's got the senior-laden teams that he's had in years past. Certainly the quarterback and Matthew Jenks is going to have to step up in a big, big way for them to get through and have a chance in that type of game. And certainly in those spots against Smith before, we saw quarterback play from Ramon Johnson and Tyler Scanlon, and they hit some big plays with Taylor Morin catching the ball. So that's going to be a big deal for them if they're to get through. I like the Fairfax pick a lot. I think that one's on point, and with them beating Lake Braddock this past week, that's going to give them a lot of confidence. You never count out South County because we've done that before and it's proven us wrong. So they're a team that they might have to reinvent themselves a little bit as we get towards the playoffs and see what they can hang their hat on, just besides the balance and defensively, bringing pressure, creating turnovers. That's been effective for them. So there is a team or 2. South County's got the familiarity and a more recent win against a Smith in a state final. So they would be the team I would look at. But to me, I'd go back to Centerville and Fairfax as ones that would scare me because they got that player. In Rojas's case, 2 sides of the ball. You've got a guy that can dominate both sides of the ball. And I remember a few years back when Colonial Forge played Oscar Smith, they had a guy that was a 3-phase scary playmaker in Josh Surratt, who would put the fear of God in your heart, if you will. So if you've got a player like that, it really makes other teams, the antenna up a little bit, like, we're in a dogfight. And I think Battlefield and Madison are good enough to beat anybody in their regions. They just haven't had – they remind me a lot of each other in Battlefield in 6B and Madison in 6D. They're well coached. They're disciplined. They're fundamental. I don't know if they got that one or two guy that's at that elite clip that they can just ride to the finish line of that game. Because if you get down 21-6 or 35-16, how are you going to make it up? And can you keep it from getting to that point? And we have not seen that happen in more recent showdowns at that level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about 5? Let's go to 5 because we really covered 6. Let's start up here with Stonebridge because Stonebridge is the top seed and they're trending to probably you got Mountain View also, which is a good team even though they tripped up. What about that region in 5, Matt?
Going back to the player that scares you, Patrick Henry Roanoke is not a high seed, and they've been tripped up a couple of times. Had that one loss in the opener to Brookville that kind of raised some eyebrows because that was a Class 3 school and it hurt them for PowerPoints. But they've got a player in Penn State recruit Carmelo Taylor. They call him the Cat because he is cat quick like.
Right.
He affects the game, not just catching screens, taking them to the house on bubbles, but also the special teams game, returning a kick. And they had a big playoff output last year in the first round, scored a lot of points. So if you're a Stonebridge or a Mountain View, you do not want to see them in the first round because they can put up points and really make it a dogfight for you. Just last year, they put up 42 on Massaponax as a 7 seed and knocked Massaponax out of the first round. Mountain View, I was liking a whole lot. Colonial Forge knocked them off. I didn't see that coming from the standpoint of Colonial Forge could not move the ball and score against Highland Springs, and they won a 12-7 slobber knocker type of game. So Mountain View, I wondered, they have that running back and Mike Daniels going to Syracuse. Their defense is sound, but I don't know if their defense is built to stop Stonebridge. Back when Stonebridge lost to Freedom, I caught up with Mickey Thompson before the game. I think he knew it was coming, had a couple of injuries. He was trying to get the passing game established.
Yep.
Now they're in game 8, game 9 mode, and they're Stonebridge of old. And they're now back to what they do. And they're, that team that we expect come playoff time to be razor sharp. So I feel like Stonebridge is in good shape. The one team I would circle, I think Patrick Henry has the most electrifying player in Carmelo Taylor, but Riverbend. Riverbend had
that's what I was getting ready to say.
Yeah, they had that 70-point loss to Freedom, and everybody wrote them off, including myself. I dropped out of the top 10 right away. But Riverbend has been building as a program. They're a younger program. Sure. Last year, they lost to Stonebridge 58-3, so they might not match up great with Stonebridge. But if they got Mountain View in that second round, they've got Matthias Mega Barnwell, the tight end who's going to Penn State. They run the ball effectively. Their quarterback Triplett can throw it. And I think their defense has improved more than most at this time of the year from where they were. I think at the beginning of the year, their defense was trying to figure it out. Now they've got to a respectable defense. So I would watch out for Riverbend as a team that might get to Thanksgiving weekend. They see Stonebridge, that could be their kryptonite.
One thing to point out is that Fredericksburg area, because you got to think about King George and Essex. That's just to the east of Fredericksburg. And then you got the Spotsylvania teams down there. I mean, Cortland become really good. There was no Massaponax when we were coming up. So I mean, you got some really good football teams down there. And then so let's switch. We know about Highland Springs, and I don't see anybody challenging them in their region. But the great matchup is the two regions down at Hampton Roads where you got Maury as well as Green Run. Let's start with Green Run because they're probably going to have a rematch with Kempsville.
Yeah, their quarterback just on Saturday, Kevin White, was 12 of 18 for 238 yards, 3 touchdowns. He ran it well. He's a problem for people to deal with. And that was against the Salem team that's got a devastating pass rusher off the edge, and Ari Watford, one of the most highly recruited sophomores. Kempsville right now, here's a funny one. I watched them first game of the year against Green Run. Green Run dominated the first half. The second half, it ended up being a situation where Kempsville was controlling the clock, running the ball effectively. And then what happened for them was they had an interception in the end zone. And then they got the ball back, one-score game, pick 6. Caleb Turner runs it back for Green Run. Right now, Kempsville's got some injuries and some things they're dealing with. They got a big game coming up with Cox High School, who is quietly 7-1, coached by Pro Football Hall of Famer Alan Faneca.
That's right.
He's got a very dynamic playmaker.
People are sleeping on Salem and Cox.
Yeah, and Gordon Cooper's really good. Gerard Johnson, a defensive lineman, is going to blow up in the summertime. He's already got a dozen offers. He reminds me a lot of Jordan Williams, who played there and went to Clemson and Virginia Tech. So they're going to be the thing about Cox is they don't make a lot of mistakes and beat themselves, which has happened to Kempsville, Salem, and Bayside in the second half when they've had chances against Green Run. You can't make mistakes. Now, Cox doesn't have the amount of athleticism or parts that Salem, Kempsville, and Bayside have. But the recipe, if you're going to beat Green Run, you've got to do what Bayside did in the first half. They ran the ball, kept them off the field, controlled the clock. You can't do that. The only team I see in 5A or 5B that does that is Maury. Maury is brilliantly coached by Doree McCain. They've got a running back who is arguably the best player in Tidewater going right now in Peyton Jones, who's committed to Duke. They have a bunch of receivers, and their defense has shown in the past in big games and playoff atmospheres that they can handle a team. Last year, they were just a couple of plays away from beating Stonebridge. They were right there, and they brought back those guys on defense. This defense lost its best player, emotional leader, and Nathaniel Booganox at linebacker due to injury. They've rallied behind that, and they've had some sophomores and juniors gain valuable playing time experience, and now they're running in the form here in the playoffs. The one thing about Maury is that Eastern District outside of Lake Taylor, all these games have been lopsided.
Yeah.
So and even their region, no disrespect to the Woodsides, Nans, whatever, Kickatans, Norviews, they're not going to probably get a scare. And that region playoff goes with 6 teams in a bye. So can Maury amp it up for Green Run? A lot of social media chatter, as you guys know, and those 757 folks. That'll get them fired up. That will help give the ammo that they need and the juice to get ready for that matchup. But they have to worry about that quarterback for Green Run. He's very, very good. I would tell you, Kempsville can beat Green Run if they do 2 things: run the ball, provided they're healthy, and B, not turn it over late. Because they've played Green Run close 3 times. But to me, the quarterback for Green Run's a difference maker. And Kevin White, he's got a bunch of receivers. And I think we're headed for that Green Run Maury collision. Kempsville's going to have to be healthy. If they can ride their bruising Jerome Bettis-like fullback, running back, and Naquan Washington Pierce, they can be there. And Cox is going to be pesky because they led Green Run at the half a year ago. And if they don't make mistakes and you let them hang around, you could be holding your breath at the start of the fourth quarter. Question is, do they have enough in the tank to finish the job, enough athletes to make that play or two?
Yeah, I don't think Green Run wants to see Kempsville. And, I want to transition to 4 and wrap up. But 4 has incredible parity. I mean, Kings Fork, I believe it's Lake Taylor, and then in the Central, you got Dinwiddie, King George, Varina. So my question is, I think those 2 regions, I think the champion will come out of there. And I actually think the Varina's region is going to produce the champion. And you're picking King George, but who do you like coming there? And then on the other side, we talked a little bit about the regions in 4. We got Loudoun County up here. I'm going to pick Tuskegee. Kettle Run's a sleeper, but let's just talk about real quick and get through this for people listening. Is who do you like in 4? I'm going to pick the winner of the Varina Dinwiddie. I think they're going to face Salem, and then they're going to face. I'm going to go with Tuscarora playing EC Glass.
All right, not bad. I'm going to go with right now Kings Fork to win 4A. I do think they will get everything together for them by playoff time. Warwick and Sharpston will push them in that region. But what's weird about that is if I was to rank the 4A, 4B teams together because they meet in the state semis, I might put Kings Fork 4th behind the likes of Varina, Dinwiddie, King George. Whereas a month or so ago, I would have said I might put Kings Fork 2. But the thing is, they're going to have their odds are better to get through. 4C and 4D really is a crapshoot right now. Tuskegee's not a bad pick. Probably the best pick at the moment. I think line of scrimmage is where it matters, and they've got multiple guys up front that are real. I mean, just solid cogs to what they do with Fletcher Westfall, the massive human being at tackle, and then Caleb Nitta, who's going to Liberty in the interior part of that line. So they're probably the safest pick, and they've done this with the coaching change before the season and gotten to where they are. 4D, Salem is that team that always is there come playoff time. Something about Louisa screams to me that they're going to be right there, and they have 2 freshmen that are really bursting onto the scene. So I could see Louisa knock out a Salem or EC Glass, and that might be the dark horse that I go with out of 4D. Ultimately, the state champion to me is coming out of 4B. Whoever gets through that war, that gauntlet of
That's right.
George.
Yep.
So totally agree.
Do you see a rematch with Phoebus and Liberty Christian in 3?
I do, but let me caution you with this. Lake Taylor, who's in 3A, if their defensive line can break down the Phoebus offensive line, that game will be another Phoebus-Lake Taylor classic. I think that's going to be the key if Lake Taylor can play with them, because Phoebus is going to hit that big player 2 on the Lake Taylor defense, which is going to bring pressure. If you can't block Hank Slaughter's kitchen sink thrown at you, you're in trouble. And I do think Lake Turner will move the ball on this vaunted Phoebus defense. Now, the question is, can they score and finish those drives, play some keep away? They'll do that, but can they score on them? That could be another 14-7, 13-6, down to the wire, 10-7, 21-20 overtime game at Darling Stadium on a Friday night. I might be there for it. I look forward to seeing those two go head-to-head. They've had some memorable battles over the years, but as great as Phoebus has been statistically, they have not been pushed. And I do think Lake Taylor's taken some positives out of their comeback from 12 down against Churchland, their narrow win over Hermitage out of Richmond, and even that Morey game where it was a one-score game through 3 quarters of play. And they're big up front, so Phoebus is going to have to really bring it up front in the trenches to beat Lake Taylor, because at the skill positions everywhere else, they match up great.
Yep.
Up front's going to be the game. They've got to hold up front.
I think Oscar Smith on the 4th will be a big litmus test of how they do against them. And then we've got a 7-5-7 team, and we're going to wrap up. Poquoson in 2. Give us a real quick view on 2. We know River Bend does well in 1, but how about 2? Poquoson, who's been building a great program.
Yeah, Elliott Duty's done a great job there for years and years and years. They don't really ever have that hallmark prospect, but they run the ball with 3 or 4 backs. Defensively, they routed the football with some undersized kids at the linebacker and defensive back spots. And I think because King William doesn't have that Damon Claiborne this year, or that unbelievable skill kid, TJ Richmond has been really good this year up there in the 804 area code, and they've got some speed and skill, and they've played some higher classification schools. Like I mentioned, the overtime loss that was close to Glen Allen, who's a Class 5 member. I think Poquoson's got a good chance here. I would give the slight nod today to TJ of Richmond over Poquoson, with King William as a distant third.
Okay. All right, man. Hey. Man, can you no, so Kirk, I just want to say this. Matt is the man, right? So, well, I mean, you are all over the state. You know this stuff like you just on top of it. Is there anything you can share with us that we haven't asked you, or you think is of value that our audience would really appreciate coming from the great Matt Hatfield?
A nugget.
A nugget. Well, I would say let's see if Riverheads can make this 7 in a row. I know it's Class 1, and we're all always, and I'm guilty of it as well. So I'm not saying you guys or anybody caught up in what's happening in Tidewater or Richmond or Nova or Roanoke. And Riverheads is a neat story. To win 6 straight like they have and for 7th is going to be unbelievable. I'm actually doubting them just a little bit, because I think Essex, and we put them number 1 ahead of Riverheads after Riverheads lost. I think Essex is playing at a different clip, much like I probably gave Oscar Smith ammo by putting Freedom number 1 ahead of them when they had that unbelievable showing after beating Stonebridge. But I feel like that's going to be a story to watch here, because sometimes we don't appreciate the greatness of teams like Phoebus's teams and Hampton's teams, and what Highland Springs and Stonebridge have done to go on a streak of playing in the state championship 4 or 5 years in a row, or winning 6 of them. That's hard to do, and they're doing it. So many schools with coaching changes. Remember, Phoebus is going from Bill D to Stan Sexton to Jeremy Blunt. Oscar Smith went from Rich Morgan, who's down and coaching in Georgia, to the late great Bill D to Scott Johnson, now Chris Scott. I mean, Stonebridge, Mickey Thompson's been there forever. Lauren Johnson's been at Highland Springs for forever. But Robert Casto left, and Ray Norcross, his longtime assistant, who had been at the school longer than Casto had been, took over, and they don't seem to miss a beat. They got Caden Cook Cash healthy. So that's the thing as far as watching some historical perspective to see what happens there. And then we're also seeing if, Freedom is chasing a record that I didn't think was going to be caught. The 96 Hampton Crabbers was scoring points in a season.
Yep.
I mean, to be in pursuit of that mark in a 15-game season. Manchester, they won the state championship and beat Freedom, finished like a touchdown away from tying that mark with Brendan Clark.
Oh, wow.
He went to Notre Dame and is now at Old Dominion. So I'm always curious, trying to – and there's a lot of great historians in our state. Lynn Burke, I think, is the best now that we've lost the late, great Marshall Johnson, who was the record book keeper for the VHSL. But to see if we have some history made or snapped, be it that type of streak, consecutive games Free Riverheads had, and they had it snapped. They were tied it with Phoebus. Laura Botetourt beat them. And if there's any record set come playoff time, be it with championships or points scored, that should be really fascinating to watch unfold come November and December.
Yeah.
All right.
Good stuff.
Well,
man.
Thanks again, Matt. Please, I'd love tell us where we can find you and all your different places.
Yeah.
And you guys definitely get out there and support Matt, but listen to him because he's a wealth of knowledge, as you can tell.
I appreciate that, guys, and thank you for all that you do for the high school sports and the community and so forth. But they can check out my work, virginiapreps.com. I'm the publisher there. We're part of the Rivals Network powered by Yahoo Sports. Sign up today.